Some men find out their grandson has been living on cereal bars in an empty house. Some men just pour a drink and go back to sleep. I called a locksmith and a lawyer before sunrise. But we'll get to that. Thursday, April 9th, Cedar Falls, Iowa. 11:52 p.m. I was in my recliner, half asleep with a rerun of some fishing show mumbling in the background, because that's what a man does when he's 68 and has earned the right to fall asleep with the TV on. My phone lit up on the arm of the chair. Gloria Whitfield. Now Gloria doesn't call past 9. She's 79 years old and she goes to bed with the birds. The only other time she'd called me after dark was the night a possum got into her attic and she needed somebody to talk her down. So, when her name came up at 11:52 on a Thursday, something in my chest went cold before I even answered. I picked up on the first ring. Gloria? Frank. Her voice was thin, careful. I'm sorry to bother you this late, I really am, but I didn't know who else to call. I was already sitting up straight. What's wrong? She let out a breath like she'd been holding it for an hour. I've heard Tommy through that wall for 2 nights now. Crying. I finally went over this afternoon and knocked, and he opened the door himself. Standing there in his pajamas at 4 in the afternoon with a box of crackers on the counter and the television going. Frank, he was by himself. The room went very still around me. I asked him where his mom and dad were, Gloria said. He told me they went on a trip, left Tuesday morning. I asked if any grown-up had been checking on him, and he said a man from the church brought him a sandwich yesterday, but he didn't know his name. Frank, he asked me if you knew. First thing out of his mouth. Does Grandpa know? I was already up, already reaching for my shoes. I'm on my way right now. I called Tommy before I even had my boots tied. It rang once, just once, like he'd been sitting next to that phone in the dark, waiting. Grandpa? Lord. That voice. 9 years old, and already sounding like a kid who'd learned not to expect too much from anybody. Hey, bud. You doing okay? I think so, he said. I think so. 9 years old and already hedging his own feelings so nobody else would have to carry them. Tommy, listen to me. Is the door locked? Yes, sir. Good man. You eat today? I had some crackers this morning. And Mr. Roy from church brought a sandwich yesterday, but I only ate half. I saved the other half. I didn't know when somebody was coming. He rationed half a sandwich for a day and a half because he didn't know when help was coming. I stood there in my hallway with one boot on and felt something crack straight down the center of my chest. Pack a bag, bud, I told him. Grandpa's coming right now and you are not spending one more night in that house alone. Silence on the line. Then, so quiet I almost missed it. Grandpa, did I do something wrong? Because Bella got to go and I asked Mom if I could come too and she said the resort was too expensive for 2 kids. My birthday was 3 weeks ago. They gave me a video game. I thought maybe I did something, but I can't think what it was. I stopped moving entirely. Stood there in my own front hall in Cedar Falls, Iowa, at midnight, with my shoes half tied, and I made a decision right then that wasn't emotional and wasn't temporary. It was permanent. Tommy, you did not do one single thing wrong. You hear me? Not one thing. Now go grab your dinosaur and your blue hoodie and unlock that front door. I'll be there in 6 minutes. Gloria was already sitting on her own porch steps when my headlights swung onto Larkspur Court, and Tommy was right beside her, wrapped in one of her Afghans, a little backpack at his feet, a stuffed stegosaurus tucked under one arm. When my headlights hit him, he stood straight up. Then he ran. He didn't say a word when he reached the truck. He just grabbed hold and hung on. I picked him up, all 61 pounds of him, and held him right there in the driveway of my daughter's house, and looked over his shoulder at Gloria, who had her hand pressed to her mouth, trying to hold herself together on those porch steps. I called Marcus's cell yesterday morning, Gloria said quietly. No answer. Left a message. Nothing back. Of course nothing. I got Tommy buckled in myself, tucked a blanket around his legs. Before I shut the door, Gloria touched my sleeve. Frank, I know somebody. An attorney, family law. She's sharp as a tack and she does not lose. Her name's Diane Castellano, office over on Main Street. 20 years, never dropped a custody case in her life. Send me her number, I said. Right now, Gloria. She already had her phone out. Tommy was asleep before we hit the end of the block. I drove home through Cedar Falls in dead silence, radio off, just the heater running and his breathing slow and even behind me. At the light on University and Ridgeway, it turned red, and I sat there and thought, don't do it, Frank. I did it anyway. I pulled up my daughter's Instagram. There it was, posted at 7:52 that evening. Marcus, my daughter Deb, and Bella standing on a resort balcony somewhere in the Florida Keys, the sunset doing exactly what sunsets do when somebody wants a good picture. Deb in a sundress. Bella holding a little cup with an umbrella in it. Marcus, my son-in-law, with his arm around my daughter, grinning like a man with absolutely nothing sitting on his conscience. Caption: Girls' trip with my two favorite ladies. Blessed doesn't cover it. 2. Not 3. 2. The light turned green. I didn't move. The truck behind me laid on the horn. I still didn't move. Sat there staring at those words until the horn went off again, longer this time, good and annoyed. Yeah, buddy, I thought. Me too. I got Tommy home, tucked him into the guest room with his stegosaurus and an extra quilt and a glass of water on the nightstand, and sat on the edge of that bed until his breathing evened all the way out. Then I went to my kitchen table, opened up my old laptop, made a pot of coffee I didn't need, and started writing every single thing down, every date, every word Tommy had said, word for word. Lap, Gloria's account, the Instagram post, the timestamps, the voicemail Marcus never returned. This wasn't anger anymore. This was evidence. At 1:40 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Gloria had sent the contact card. Diane Castellano, Castellano Family Law, Main Street, Cedar Falls, 20 years experience. I saved it and opened a new tab and started looking at flights to Key West. Because here's the thing about being a grandfather in Cedar Falls, Iowa, who just pulled his 9-year-old grandson out of an empty house where the boy had been rationing crackers and half a sandwich for 2 straight days. You don't get mad. You get organized. If you've stuck with me this far, do me one favor. Hit subscribe. Costs you nothing, means a great deal to me. And go ahead and like this one while you're at it. I'll see you through to the end. By 3 in the morning, I had 2 round-trip tickets to Key West booked, an oceanfront room at the Sunset Harbor Inn confirmed, and a 9 o'clock appointment request sent to Diane Castellano's office that read simply, "My name is Frank Delaney." My grandson was left alone in a house for 2 days while his parents took his sister on a trip to the Keys. I need to understand every option I have. I'll be in your office the day I'm back in town, Frank. Then I called Marcus. 2:14 a.m. I knew he wouldn't pick up. I didn't want him to. I wanted him to wake up the next morning in that resort room, roll over, reach for his phone, and find a voicemail from his father-in-law sitting there waiting for him like a loaded gun. The tone beeped. "Marcus," I said, calm, almost cheerful. "Just wanted you to know I've got Tommy. We're taking a little trip of our own. Hope the Keys are everything you wanted them to be." I let the pause sit there just long enough. "We'll talk when you get home." I hung up, walked down the hall, checked on Tommy one more time. Curled up with that stegosaurus, face finally soft, no worry lines on that little forehead anymore. He looked like exactly what he was. A boy, just a boy. They say living well is the best revenge. I say the best revenge is living well while your lawyer is quietly stacking a case that's going to buckle somebody's knees. But we'll get to that. Friday, April 10th, 6:20 a.m. I was on my second cup of coffee when Tommy shuffled into the kitchen in his socks, hair sticking up in 6 directions, dinosaur dangling from one fist, looking like a small, confused owl. He stopped in the doorway. "Grandpa, why are you already dressed?" "Because we've got a plane to catch, bud." He blinked. "A plane? Key West, Florida. You and me. We leave in 3 hours. That owl blinked again, slower this time, like he was scared to want it too bad. The corner of his mouth started to move. "Are you serious? Do I look like a man who jokes about Florida?" He looked at me for 1 full second. Then he let out a whoop that could have woken the whole street and took off running for his room, and I sat there at my own kitchen table in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and smiled into my coffee for the first time in 12 hours. That sound right there. That's what all of it was for. Saturday, April 11th, Sunset Harbor Inn, Key West, Florida, 10:40 a.m. Understand something about me. I'm a 68-year-old man from Iowa who drives a Chevy with 190,000 miles on it and considers a truck stop diner fine dining. I don't do resorts. I don't do valet parking or turn down service or menus without prices on them. But I booked the oceanfront suite anyway. And when the bellman opened that door and the whole Gulf of Mexico came pouring in through floor-to-ceiling windows like somebody had polished the entire sky, I decided turn-down service wasn't the worst thing in the world. Tommy walked in behind me and just stopped, both hands at his sides, Stegosaurus hanging from one fist. Stared for a good 10 seconds. "Grandpa," his voice barely came out. "Are we rich?" I laughed so hard I had to set my bag down. "We are for the next 5 days, bud. Can I touch the window?" "You can lick the window if you want it bad enough. We're paying enough for it." He let out this bright, startled giggle that bounced clean off the marble floor and ran straight at the glass with both arms out. Right there, that giggle, that was the one that nearly took me apart. Because it hit me all at once that I hadn't heard that sound out of him in months, and I hadn't even noticed it had gone quiet until it came back. The next 4 days I'll carry with me till they put me in the ground. Day 1. The pool with the twisting slide. Tommy went down it 14 times. 14. I counted. By the 8th time, the lifeguard was giving him a fist bump at the top. By the 14th, he had a little cheering section of strangers hollering for him at the bottom like he was setting a record. Which, as far as he was concerned, he was. Day 2. Deep-sea fishing off the pier at sunrise with a charter captain named Reuben, a quiet, weathered man who put a rod in Tommy's hands and stood behind him the whole time without saying much, just nodding when the boy did something right. Tommy reeled in a little snapper and held it up like he'd hauled in a marlin, sky turning pink and gold behind him. "Grandpa, take a picture." I took about 30. Posted one on Facebook. Tommy grinning ear to ear, fish in both hands, ocean behind him. Caption: "My grandson's first catch. Never seen him stand this tall." I knew Marcus would see it. Posted it anyway. Call it information. Call it a preview. Day 3. A cooking class with a chef named Delia, a woman built like she'd wrestled alligators for a living and had a laugh you could hear 2 floors down. She looked at Tommy like he was a long-lost cousin showing up for Sunday dinner. "Well, look at you. You ready to make some key lime pie? Or you just here for the tasting?" Tommy looked at me. I nodded. He squared his little shoulders like he was walking into a job interview. "I'm ready." What followed was more lime zest and graham cracker crumbs than I've ever seen outside a grocery store aisle. It got on Tommy, on Delia, somehow on me standing clear across the kitchen. Delia talked the whole time about her grandmother's kitchen in Marathon, about how a good pie crust is just butter and patience, sugar. That's the whole secret. Tommy listened to every word, tongue between his teeth, hands working that dough like he'd done it in another life. At the end, Delia tasted his pie, closed her eyes like she'd been handed an award, and said, "This one's got the gift. You bring him back next season, I'll make him my assistant." Tommy beamed so hard I thought his face might crack open. I took a picture of that too, lime zest on his nose, grinning like he'd conquered something. Because he had. But here's the part nobody saw. Every night after Tommy fell asleep, I stepped out onto that balcony, slid the door shut quiet behind me, and called Diane Castellano. 9 o'clock sharp, every time. Diane did not do small talk. 20 years in family law, apparently she'd used hers all up around 2006 and had none left over. Suited me fine. Night 1. Tell me everything, start to finish. Don't editorialize, just facts and times. I talked for 35 straight minutes. She interrupted exactly twice, both times to pin down exact hours. When I finished, she went quiet a moment, the kind of quiet that means someone's thinking, not stalling. "Here's where we stand," she said. "What happened here has a name under Iowa law, Frank. Leaving a child under 12 without adequate supervision for more than 24 hours meets the bar for child neglect under state statute. You're sure of that? I've built cases on a lot less. Here's what we've got. Your neighbor's first-hand account that's rock solid, direct, and she'll put it in writing. We've got the boy's own statement, which I'll need recorded properly. We've got a time-stamped social media post during the exact window he was alone. And we've got your voicemail establishing you as the one who actually stepped in." She paused. "I'll also want school records. Any flags from teachers or counselors in the last 2 years. I can have them by Monday." "Good. When I'm back in Cedar Falls, I want the whole framework ready to go." We're going after three things at once, she said. Enforceable grandparent visitation, a formal report to Child Protective Services, fully documented, and a request for a home evaluation, given the emotional pattern here. I exhaled slow into that Florida night air. Will Tommy have to testify? Her voice didn't shift an inch. Not if I do my job right. And I always do my job right. I believed every word of it. Night 2. Diane walked me through the money side. Trust restructuring, the college account, the will. She talked about irrevocable trusts the way other people talk about the weather. Matter of fact, already decided. Once it's filed, it's done, she said. Not Marcus, not Deb, not any lawyer they hire, ever touches it again. You're certain? Never been more certain of anything, Diane. Then I'll have the paperwork ready before you land. Night 3 was the one I wasn't ready for. I was on the balcony reading Diane the school records I'd had Tommy's teacher send over 2 years of notes, a documented slide in his grades, a flag from the school counselor 4 months back that Marcus and Deb had gotten, signed off on, and then done nothing about when I heard the slider open behind me. Tommy, standing there in his pajamas, Stegosaurus dangling, squinting at me with sleepy, suspicious eyes. Grandpa, who are you talking to? I covered the phone. Just a work call, bud. Go on back to bed. He considered that with the full seriousness of a courtroom judge. Then can I have some water? There's a bottle by your bed. Can I have the fancy water from the little fridge? I am on the phone with a lawyer building a legal case against your mom and dad. And you're out here negotiating minibar water at 9 o'clock at night. One bottle. Then bed. He vanished without another word of argument. I went back to Diane. Sorry about that. 9-year-old interruption. I heard, Diane said, and I will swear on my life I caught the faintest trace of something warm underneath that flat professional tone. He sounds like he's doing a lot better. He really is. Good. Hold on to that. The gap between how he was at home and how he is right now in your care that's going to matter a great deal in front of a judge. I wrote that down word for word, but it was night 4 I truly was not prepared for. We were at the resort's restaurant on the water, white tablecloths, candles, the kind of place where the breadbasket shows up before you've even sat all the way down. Tommy was eating fried conch for the first time, making a new face with every bite, narrating each one out loud like a food critic, finally announcing with great ceremony that he loved it. I was sitting there just watching him, thinking, this is what he looks like when nobody's making him feel small, when he suddenly set his fork down, went quiet, stared at the tablecloth a second, then looked up at me with those big brown eyes. Grandpa. Am I adopted because something's wrong with me? The whole restaurant kept right on moving around us. Glasses clinking somewhere, a couple laughing at the bar. But at our table, everything stopped cold. I set my fork down slow, reached across that white tablecloth and took both his hands in mine, and I told him the truth. All of it. Age-appropriate, careful, completely honest. I told him what adoption means and what it flat out does not mean. I told him that being chosen isn't a consolation prize, it's the whole prize. I told him his birth mother had been young and scared and afraid, and that what she'd done had come from love, not from throwing him away. I told him I would drive through a hurricane, fly across the country, and turn over every rock in the state of Iowa before I let one soul make him feel like a leftover. His eyes went shiny. He nodded slow, taking in every word with that serious little face he gets. Then he looked at my bread basket. Can I have some of your bread? You can have the whole thing. And dessert? Order 2. He smiled small at first, then wider, then the real one, the kind that starts slow and climbs all the way up to his eyes and just stays put. I excused myself to the restroom after dessert, ran cold water over my wrists, and looked at myself in that mirror a long while, because I'd held it together at that table for him. Steady and warm because that's what he needed. But I'm only a man, and somewhere out there on the water, on a resort deck full of tiki torches and carefully staged photographs, my son-in-law was sleeping just fine. That thought is what dried my hands, straightened my collar, and walked me back out to sit down across from my grandson and make the decision that had been building in me since Gloria's call. No more waiting. No more benefit of the doubt. We were going home to Cedar Falls, and Diane Castellano had work to do. If you've made it this far, and you want more of these, hit that like button and subscribe. Means more than you know. Some folks need a courtroom to find justice. Some folks just need one conversation. Marcus needed both, and I made sure he got them. Sunday, April 19th, Cedar Falls, Iowa, 5:10 p.m. Tommy fell asleep on the plane home, head on my shoulder, Stegosaurus in his lap, a half-eaten bag of pretzels still in his hand, like he'd just stopped mid-bite and gone under. The flight attendants smiled at us collecting trash. I held up a hand. "Let him sleep, please." She nodded and moved on quiet. I sat there at 30-some thousand feet with my grandson asleep on my shoulder, thinking about what was waiting back in Cedar Falls, not with dread. With something closer to certainty, the kind a man feels when he already knows exactly what's coming and is ready for every version of it. Marcus and Deb had landed 2 days earlier. I knew because Marcus had finally answered my Tuama's voicemail. Not a call, not even a real sentence. 5 words by text, no punctuation. "We need to talk. Home Sunday." I read it twice, then forwarded it to Diane with one line attached. "Monday, my house, 9 sharp." She wrote back in under 3 minutes. "Already cleared my morning. I'll bring everything." Monday, April 20th, my kitchen, 8:58 a.m. Diane Castellano showed up at my door 2 minutes early, which I'd come to learn was the latest she ever showed up anywhere. Gray blazer, sensible heels, a briefcase that had clearly sat in rooms a lot tenser than mine. She set her folder on my table, took coffee without ceremony, and sat down like she'd been sitting at it her whole career. I liked her more every time I saw her. "They don't know I'm here," she said, not looking up from her folder. "They think it's a family talk." The faintest smile crossed her face. "It is. Just a very well-documented one." At 9:02 I heard Marcus's car in the driveway. "Here we go." The door opened. Marcus came in first, my son-in-law, 41 years old, sunburned from 10 days on the water, wearing a collared shirt like he'd dressed on purpose for this. Tired underneath that tan, the kind sleep doesn't touch because it isn't coming from being tired, it's coming from somewhere sleep can't reach. Deb came right behind him, chin up, shoulders set, jaw tight. My own daughter, and she'd clearly spent the whole drive over building her argument, walking in fully armored and ready to use it. Marcus opened his mouth. Then he saw Diane. He stopped mid-step like somebody had cut his power. "Dad, who?" "Marcus, Deb, this is Diane Castellano," I said pleasantly. "Family attorney, 20 years, office on Main. Sit down, there's coffee." Deb's eyes went from Diane to me to the open folder and back. Something shifted behind them, not fear yet. Recalculating. "Dad." Her voice was tight. "We came for a family conversation, not some." "Please sit, Mrs. Whitfield," Diane said. 4 words, dead level. Deb sat. Not because she wanted to, because something in that tone made the alternative feel a good deal worse. I knew that tone myself, straight from a hotel balcony in Key West, and I understood completely. Marcus sat beside her, hands flat on the table, still not looking at me. He knew. He'd known since he played that voicemail on some resort balcony. Carried it 2 states and 10 days of ocean air, and it was sitting right there on his face for anybody paying attention. Diane opened her folder without any theater to it. No pause, no build-up. Just slid one typed sheet across the table like she was passing salt. A timeline. Clean. Exact. No mercy in it anywhere. Tuesday, April 7th. Marcus and Deborah Whitfield depart Cedar Falls with minor child Isabella Whitfield for the Florida Keys. Minor child Thomas Whitfield, age 9, remains at family residence on Larkspur Court without adult supervision. April 7th through April 9th, Thomas Whitfield observed alone at residence by neighbor Gloria Whitfield, no relation. Child reported subsisting on crackers and a partial sandwich over the 2-day period. Thursday, April 9th, 11:52 p.m. Gloria Whitfield contacts Frank Delaney. Thursday, April 9th, 11:58 p.m. Frank Delaney retrieves Thomas Whitfield from the residence. Marcus read it. Not one muscle in his face moved. Deb read it. Every muscle in hers did. "This is completely, you can't just, we had arrangements." "Mrs. Whitfield." Diane's voice stayed perfectly pleasant, perfectly immovable. "I'm going to save us all some time this morning. What's on that page has a specific legal meaning under Iowa statute. Leaving a child under 12 without adequate supervision meets the definition of neglect. We are not here to debate whether it happened. It happened. We have a signed statement from the neighbor. We have time-stamped social media documentation. We have the child's own recorded, notarized account. She slid a second page across. We're here to talk about what happens next. Deb opened her mouth again. Marcus put a hand on her arm. Firm. She stopped. I noted that. Filed it away. First real thing my son-in-law had done right in this whole business. 2 weeks late, but noted. Diane laid it out like a surgeon. Clean, no wasted motion. 3 actions, already drafted, ready to file. Enforceable grandparent visitation, non-negotiable. A formal CPS report, backed by 2 years of school records including a counselor flag from 4 months back that Marcus and Deb had received, signed, and ignored completely. A request for a home evaluation tied directly to the documented change in Tommy's emotional state. With every sheet Diane set on the table, Deb's color changed from armored pink to a very specific pale, the color of somebody running numbers in their head and not landing on a single one that helped them. Marcus hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, was staring at that timeline like a man staring at a wreck he'd caused himself. Diane folded her hands. The CPS report is fully drafted. It has not been filed. That stays a choice for the next 72 hours. Silence. Real silence. With weight to it. Then Marcus looked up off that page and looked straight at me for the first time since he'd walked through my door. His eyes were red. Frank. Just my name. Carrying 2 weeks of everything he hadn't said, all folded into one word. I waited. Gave him nothing. Let him carry it the rest of the way himself. I knew, he said, voice rough and uneven. The whole time, I knew. Deb said it was just this one trip, that we'd make it up to him when we got back, and I told myself that was true because it was easier than he stopped. His jaw worked. I walked past his door with my bag, and he was sitting on his bed looking right at me, and I kept walking. Frank. I closed the front door, and I got in the car. His voice broke clean on the last word. Deb turned to look at him sharp. He didn't look back at her. Kept his eyes on me, red and wrung out, and completely without anything left to defend himself with. The room got so quiet I could hear my own kitchen clock. I looked at my son-in-law a long moment, the man I'd taught to cast a fishing line off my own dock. The man who married my daughter under a tent in my backyard while I stood up there and gave a toast that made half the guests cry. The man sitting across from me now who'd packed a bag, walked right past his son's door, and kept going. I wanted to be furious. I was furious. But underneath the fury, older than it, was something else. Grief, plain and clean. For the man I thought I'd handed my daughter to, and the one sitting in front of me now that I didn't fully recognize. I let myself feel that for 3 seconds. Then I opened my own folder. I know you knew, Marcus, I said quiet. That's the part that kept me up nights. He flinched like I'd hit him. Good. I slid the folder across. Marcus picked it up, read the first page careful, set it down with both hands, like it might break. Deb grabbed it, read it faster, set it down harder. My updated will. Reviewed and notarized by Diane's office the week before, while Tommy was eating conch fritters and negotiating minibar water in Key West. A good chunk of my estate, the house on Fairview, the savings, 40 acres my own father left me outside Cedar Falls, now sat in an irrevocable trust, set up solely for Thomas Whitfield, to be released in full on his 18th birthday, managed by an independent trustee, overseen entirely by Castellano family law. Irrevocable, meaning done, meaning no attorney Marcus or Deb ever hired, no matter how expensive, was ever laying a hand on it. Plus a college account, already open, already funded, already drawing interest while we sat at that table. Deb stared at that page, then looked up at me, and for the first time all morning, for the first time since she'd walked in with her chin up and her armor buttoned tight, the armor was just gone. What was left underneath wasn't anger. It was fear. The real kind, the kind that shows up when somebody you badly underestimated has already outmaneuvered you at every turn while you weren't looking. Dad, she started. You chose who mattered to you, I said. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't lean in. Just said it the way you say something already decided. So did I. Nobody said a word. Diane laid out the terms. 4 conditions, clear, specific, binding, no room to negotiate. 1. Tommy starts weekly sessions with a licensed child therapist inside 30 days. Trust covers every dollar. 2. I get enforceable visitation, effective that day. Every other weekend, 2 full weeks each summer. Holidays worked out in writing. 3. Marcus and Deb complete no fewer than 4 sessions of family counseling, together and separate, documented. 4. The CPS report stays sealed in Diane's files for 1 full year. Any violation, 1 skipped session, 1 incident, it gets filed the same day. No warning call, no second chance, filed. Diane closed her briefcase with 1 soft click. These aren't suggestions, she said, pleasant as ever. They're terms. Deb looked at Marcus. A whole silent argument passed between them in about 4 seconds. Then she looked back down at the table and gave 1 tight nod, like it cost her something she wasn't getting back. It did. They signed at 10:20. Marcus stood to leave and stopped in my doorway, back to me, 1 hand on the frame. Is he? His voice caught. Is Tommy okay? I let that question hang in the air a moment, long enough to be felt. He will be, I said. No thanks to you, but he will be. He nodded at the doorframe, didn't turn around, walked out. Deb followed without a word or a look back. The door clicked shut behind them. 6 months later, October, Cedar Falls, Iowa. Tommy calls me every Sunday, 6 o'clock sharp. Hasn't missed one yet. Last week he talked 40 minutes straight without coming up for air about school, about his therapist, Miss Renata, who he says always smells like cinnamon rolls, which is weird, but he actually likes it a lot. About the key lime pie he made Marcus for Father's Day off Delia's recipe. About how Bella let him pick the movie Friday night and he picked one she visibly hated, and he felt a little bad about it, but also honestly not that bad. That last part he got straight from me. I'm choosing to be proud of it. Marcus shows up to every single school thing now. Sits 3rd row, every time. Claps the loudest, and doesn't make a show of it. No big speeches, no performance. Just shows up, and stays the whole way through. It isn't redemption yet. But it's the road toward it. And I know the difference between a man performing change and a man actually doing the work. Marcus is doing the work. Deb is harder, civil, present, trying. In the weeks it's there at all, and some weeks that has to be enough. Her counselor told Marcus, and Marcus told me in one of our own conversations that have slowly started back up, that Deb had built her whole idea of family around Bella, and that Tommy had always been something she didn't know how to let all the way in. I'm no therapist. I don't fully understand it, and I'm not going to pretend I do. They spent $20,000 to make that boy feel like an afterthought. I spent a good deal more to make sure he never once forgets. He was all, and that, right there, is the whole story. If this one got to you, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.